We have one of the finest drummers in the world with us tonight, Jeff Queen, and he is a tremendous drummer to watch, and I know that you will be more than thrilled with his performance. And the Jeff Queen from Blast. Jeff, thank you.
Thank you. So these are thimbles. This is a solo that is entitled Double Flag. And I got the idea from a friend of mine many, many years ago. We were playing video games one day, and he started doing this on the controller. And I was like, that's kind of cool. And he mentioned that he had an idea to do a solo with thimbles, but he never got around to it. So this is dedicated to a good friend of mine named Chip Webster, and this is called Double Flag. Thank you, thank you. Let me just tell you guys a little bit, I guess, about how I got started doing this. And it's rare, I guess, that I do a clinic for people that all got started doing rudimental percussion. So it's kind of cool to, not only be here to present for you guys, but to see you guys play. I grew up in Washington, D.C., so I actually went to Mount Vernon High School, which was literally like don't know, about 4 drivers from the house that George Washington lived in. So I saw, I mean, our band had like 3-cornered hats, the whole deal. So I grew up watching this stuff, a lot of the stuff that I've seen you guys do tonight, and ended up turning it into a career of some sort. So it's certainly an honor to be here. So thanks for bringing me here, and I really, really appreciate it, Bill. So. Funny thing is that I never really wanted to do this. I started taking lessons when I was like in 5th grade. I was about 10 years old and wanted to be a drum set player. I loved the band Journey, and I found 2 mismatched dowel rods lying around my house. One was like this long and one was like this long, but they were drumsticks to me. So I started playing and air drumming to what I would see on videos. My parents said, hey, we should probably get him drum lessons, and started taking lessons. Got to be a decent set player by the time I got into high school. But a good friend of mine was being forced by his parents to try out for the marching band. And he's like, dude, I need some help. I need some moral support of some sort. So I was like, yeah, cool, I'll help you out, but I'm not gonna do it. I didn't think marching band was cool. And then I actually went to band camp and was going through it and had the fortune to have a guy by the name of Scott Johnson, who teaches out at the Concord Blue Devils Drum and Bugle Corps, teach my band camp. And Scott came up to my drum and played a roll, and I was wearing it, and it was, and it shook me to my core, and I was like, I want to do that. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. So I really completely changed what I thought I wanted to do at that point, and quite honestly said, I want to be the best snare drummer I can possibly be. So did the high school thing for a little bit, then went on to march in a couple different drum corps. I marched in the Canton Bluecoats in 1989. I heard somebody mention Jim Dugan's name. It might have been senior, I think, but he taught me my first year, which I thought was really cool. Then moved from Northern Virginia to Southern California and marched with the Velvet Knights for 2 years, 1990 and 91, or 90 and 91. Then went on to march with the Santa Clara Vanguard in 1992, and then the Blue Knights out of Denver, Colorado for 3 years, 93, 4, and 5. Those same 3 years, I also went to the University of North Texas, where Mr. Prosperi went to school as well. I was a little bit behind him, though. But really felt like I got a great musical education just playing in drum lines and in drum corps, and I was really fortunate to have a lot of varied instructors throughout my time. So I was able to take a lot of what this person had and that person had and that person had and sort of put it all together to form how I play today. So I'm really fortunate to have had that experience. Moving on from there, life sort of took over, and I was actually working a tech support job living in Denton, Texas, or Fort Worth actually. And I got a phone call from a guy named Tom Hannum, who was the percussion director for the Broadway show Blast, or what was to be the Broadway show Blast, and said, hey, would you be interested in doing this thing? And we always joke whenever we see each other that he's like, there's an idea about this thing. And it turned out to be, an opportunity to play snare drum professionally over in London, and then to go on and tour on a Broadway show. We actually played on Broadway for a while, and then do the national tour. And when I took that position, I knew that I was going to go into music full-time in some way, shape, or form. And once I kind of ended my run with Blast around 2003, I took a position as a percussion director at Avon High School out in Indianapolis, where I live now, and went back to school for a composition degree in 2004. I was 31 years old, and then went right back in for my master's in percussion performance. Was able to get both of my degrees. Was teaching full-time and doing this and judging and writing, and now I'm pretty much a professional snare drummer and or teacher. So it's an awesome life to do what you love to do, as I'm sure you guys understand by even just being part of this convention today. So it's pretty cool. Let me talk a little bit about how I play faster and how I work to get my singles or my paradiddles or things a little bit quicker. I always start by thinking of sort of where I am now and where I want to go. So visualization is a big part of that. So if I think of, let's talk about paradiddles. If I want to play my paradiddles a lot faster, the process that I went through was understanding where I was then and trying to visualize where I wanted to go. So I would sing paradiddles. Paradiddle, paradiddle, paradiddle. I'd make some hand motion with it as well. Paradiddle, paradiddle, paradiddle. Eventually you can't say paradiddle, so just pair. And I would have that idea. Then I would clock that. So I would put a metronome to it, figure out whatever tempo that was, and have some sort of motion to it, some sort of physical identity of what that was supposed to be, as well as a mental picture of what it needed to be. The next step after the visualization was then to realize what moves quick. So I found my fingers, being the smaller muscle groups, would move pretty darn fast. So I worked on a couple different exercises to help that. One being sort of 8 on a hand. I'll move this down. Quite sensitive. 8 on a hand, but with my fingers. So I would isolate, I think I got a pad in here, I can do that. Isolate each of my fingers the same way that we would maybe work the wrist. So in my right hand, I would do just my fulcrum, just that. I would play kind of French grip, so I would have to work those fingers more than I would my wrist at this point. Then I would barely hold on with the fulcrum, and I would play with my middle finger. Then same thing, but with my ring finger. Same thing, but with my pinky. I'll kind of do this left-handed over here. So with that, middle, ring, and pinky. Then with my left hand, just playing traditional grip, I would work my thumb, index finger by itself. This one was a big one for sure. And then my middle finger. And now when I actually play, I don't use a lot of my middle finger. But I found by allowing that guy to move quickly, it enabled me to relax a lot more when I was doing singles or was doing something that I necessarily didn't need it for. Another thing was to learn how to clap one-handed. So if we can have some audience participation, everybody put your hands up right here. And what we're going to do is basically this. It looks pretty goofy, but you're doing that. So all you want to think about really is isolating, completely relaxing your fingers is the bottom line. So it's not a wrist isolation, it's a finger isolation. So we want to keep everything from where our fingers meet our palm all the way to the shoulder as a solid piece. Kind of hold your hand back a little bit and literally just kind of flap at your elbow and let those fingers smack against your palm. Keep your wrist in place though. You know, I lock the wrist, I don't want you to feel too much tension, but you got to keep the wrist still so it's just the fingers that are moving. Yeah. And you can get that sort of smacking sound in there with that. You know, you learn to play like different rhythms with it and all that kind of stuff. So, but that was something that really sort of opened my eyes to these guys can move really, really quick. I found in my right hand specifically that my ring finger had a really good twitch kind of thing to it. So I worked that as much as I could. So the small muscle groups, visualize, I'm working towards this faster tempo. And then working on playing one of something at a time. So in this case, we're talking about paradiddles. So I would try to play a paradiddle as fast as I could. And not worried so much about sound quality at this point at all. In fact, I didn't worry about sound quality at all. I was very concerned with getting faster. So the third step being focusing on those small muscle groups and really not caring too much about how it sounded. That'll be the fourth step. So I came up with an exercise. It's kind of based on the concept of 4-2-1, where you sort of take an idea, cut it in half, and cut it in half. So this will be 4 paradiddles on the downbeat, then 4 paradiddles on the upbeat, and you'll hear it sort of condense itself. And then I'll play a bunch of paradiddles at the end, kind of for good measure. So here we go with that. Thank you. So kind of fast, but didn't sound very good. So the next step is to understand how to build in quality and good sound with that speed. So that whole process goes along to finding out what your max tempo is, right? So I would play to a metronome, paradiddles, or whatever the lick was that I was trying to work on, and clock it at this tempo that sounded the best as fast as I could. So let's say that that's right in the middle of my stick here. So then if I slowed it down a little bit, ideally it would sound a little bit better. And then I would be like, okay, I got real comfortable a couple clicks slower than my max tempo and really comfortable at my max tempo. And then what I was able to do was push it just a little bit. And it wouldn't sound so great over here, but I would get faster. Then I would try to get more comfortable here. And it was sort of like a 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of scenario where I was able to get real comfortable at a place, push it a little bit, go back to that max tempo, get more comfortable, and sort of keep inching my way forward. For me personally, rolls and paradiddles, I don't want to say they came easy, but they were easier for me to get faster than some other things. Like flam rudiments that required a lot of low-end bounce took a while for me. Singles took a while to get really, really quick. I wasn't great at those for the longest time, and I still think that it's probably, of the speed stuff that I have, it's on my weaker side of things. But I continue to work that, and I noticed my single speed is probably the first thing to go in terms of what I can play at a quick tempo. So that was kind of the process that I took. I would visualize a concept or visualize the tempo I wanted to play at, clock it, have a tempo in my mind so I had a concrete idea of where I wanted to go. Then figure out the small muscle groups for that particular thing that I need to squeeze a little bit more in my fulcrum. What did my fingers need to do? Could I pump my arms? Whatever those little tiny things I could do to get a little bit quicker. Go one at a time. So it would work the same way like just playing a roll. Like one short little burst of speed, one flam accent. Same thing, just quick little short bursts of speed, and then go back and add the quality to the whole thing. So that's kind of the process I took to get a little bit quicker. I want to play another solo for you now. This is a solo called Tax Time. And this one was written for a student of mine way, way back when I was teaching in Texas. And I started to write solos for students and wanted them to work on specific skill sets. And this particular student needed to work on low-end bounce, being able to let the stick rebound, especially in his left hand at like a tap height. He always wanted to hold on really, really tight with that. He needed to work on some flam rudiments, so those are in there, flam taps and inverts specifically. Faster rolls, so you'll hear a couple short little tap rolls in there. Also some hertas, some paradiddles, some singles, and time signatures too. He didn't have the best sense of time and reading ability. So being that I started writing it around this time, back in like, I don't know, late 90s probably, I called it tax time because I was working on my taxes and also knew I was going to change up the time signatures quite a bit. You'll hear this as a main theme. So you'll hear that phrase pop in and out. You'll also hear the first little bit of that come in quite a few times as well. And you'll hear it faster, slower, and so forth. The solo's in 2 parts. It was pretty much through composed. I just knew sort of the ideas and the ingredients I wanted to use, and I just started brainstorming and came up with what you're about to hear. So this is Tax Time. that one I liked when I was finished with it a lot because so often, you know, rudimental snare drum solos, you don't hear them soft very much. So I was really kind of pleased when I tidied that whole version up, and I was like, oh man, that's kind of cool. You end with a little buzz roll. It's nice. I want to talk a little bit about how I create solos, how I compose, and some of the process that I go through in order to do that. What I would usually do is start, and this is, if anything, I do a lot of arranging for marching bands and that thing as well, that type of thing as well. So it always starts with, first and foremost, you know, who are you writing for? So if I'm writing for a less experienced group, certainly my vocabulary is going to be a little bit different than if I'm writing for a really advanced group. So I would always start with like pencil and paper and not music notation or anything, but just word ideas. I want to include this rudiment or that or this lick that I played years ago or something like that. So I would always start with an idea of that sort and then start to say, okay, well I have, you know, this many ingredients, what can I do to make something cool with that? And then I start to think of some sort of musical theme that can tie it all together. And then once I have the ingredients, I have some sort of motif that I can rely back in on, I start to think of how I can dress those ideas up differently. So what I'm going to kind of improvise, but I'm going to improvise off, say, so I start to think, well, what can I do with that? Close, but not quite. Something similar too. So I start to think of as many different outfits, basically, or variations that I can put on that particular theme. And same kind of idea if I think of different rudiments. So can I get your guys' help? I need 3 different rudiments. Somebody give me a rudiment. Jeff. Flam tap. Cool. I'm going to turn this off for this and I'll just talk loud. So flam tap. Cool. So that also gives me a 16th note bass thing. Going to that, I can take this variation. Inverse sort of comes to mind as well because it's a similar type of thing. So already I've got, you know, 3 other things that I can do within that to make that work. Another rudiment. Flam rattle. So that, you know, we can bring in the flam drag with that. There's other things too. Certainly with that triplet, and the Radamacue itself opens up just by taking the flam out of it, which then instantly opens up some backsticking opportunities and all those types of things too. All right, so we got a flam rat, we got flam taps. One more, please. Sweet. So we got that, so we can go hand to hand with that. Certainly you could dress that up. Sorts of different things with that. So those 3, so flam rat, patty fla fla, flam tap. So now, you know, I'm sort of spiraling with that. So in this scenario, I would have a recording going, I'd have my just notebook paper sitting here, and I would just brainstorm totally. Okay, and I would just, like a draft of a paper, I would just do the same sort of thing, but sort of figuring out what I want to do. I know too, I want to put some little clicky kind of things in there, maybe some old jazzer hi-hat type of stuff. I have the opportunity to play on the stand. So we'll see sort of what happens. So this is going to be an improv based on those rudiments and that little 16th note idea I played a second ago. I thought came out really, really well. Others, not so much. So I would go back and revisit the things that I didn't think came out so well, and revamp those, and take the ideas that I liked, and just go from there. So just keep drafting and drafting and drafting. Given the time, rattled off a ton of things that he said I was going to play, so we don't have that much time, so unfortunately I have 2 more things to play for you. This next one is going to be Third Rail, and this one is by a gentleman by the name of John Ling, and I started looking around for more pieces to play. I didn't have as much time to write as I would have liked, so I wanted to, A, do some fresh things for myself, and learn some new pieces, plus always playing other people's music helps inspire you to write other things and take and borrow ideas and gain that influence. So this piece is to a piano track, and John marched the Troopers, I think, a number of years ago, and wrote this piece. I think he wrote the piano part as well, so a pretty talented dude, to say the least. And yeah. guess before I play the last thing, does anybody have any questions or anything like that? Awesome. Let me talk, I'll demonstrate a couple tricks here and then I'll play the last thing. It seems backsticking is pretty common in terms of knowledge, so we'll skip that. But there's a couple things that I do that I haven't seen very many other people do, so I'll try to explain some of those real quick. So one of them is this guy. And this looks like I'm doing that, but I'm not. I'm actually letting the head take care of the bounce. So I absolutely let go right on the moment of impact and let the stick flip. So this is French grip in my right hand, and I'm just elevating my wrist just enough to make sure that it clears the rim. Okay, so I've hit right at the moment of impact and let it go. And the harder you hit it, the more it'll fly. Left hand is actually a little bit easier in the sense that you already sort of have the ability to open that up very, very easily. So the same kind of thing to make that happen. You'll see me play a solo tribute here in a second, and I'll do it with a little hair-to pattern. So you'll see that happen with that. Another one is sort of the stick-on-stick idea, this sort of thing. And that's literally the easiest trick in the book. And I wrote a book, and it's in the book. But that one, I usually, when I do a clinic like for a high school band or something like that, I'll ask a parent to come up and learn this trick. And they'll come up all sheepishly and shy. I'm like, no, it's really, really easy. So all you got to do is just press the stick to the head, and whether you play match or traditional, it doesn't really matter. Press the stick to the head, hit about a third of the way up, and get it to bounce. So you can do the single bounce, just literally holding on very lightly, and letting that happen. Then you can move that balance point anywhere you like. You'll see me kind of go up and down through my fingers, different places on the rim. Then also, if you squeeze a little bit, you can start to create some different rhythms with it. So you can play like a roll. You can play flam accents. And all of this is just by adjusting that pressure in the fulcrum. And the way that you can start to learn that is to press into the head and gradually let it loosen up. As you loosen your fulcrum, it'll buzz a little bit, and then it'll start to actually bounce. Flam taps. And then my personal favorite, which is flam drags. So all different little things that you can do with that particular little trick. I guess one last one is sort of the stick toss. That one, I do a thing that you'll see in this next little solo. And the idea behind that is basically this toss, grab, catch. Toss, grab, catch. So you throw one stick, and I learned a lot of these over my bed. So I didn't have to bend down farther to pick them up and didn't make as much noise either when I dropped. So, but you throw a half rotation in one hand, and then you sort of, it's I guess another trick built into that where you have to learn that guy. So this is basically playing 8 on a hand here, and then the next note that you grab with is actually played with the right hand, not with the left, and then it moves over very quickly. And then you just put the toss in over top of that, and that's what you get with that guy. So, without further ado, I'm going to play a solo entitled Tribute for you guys. This is the solo that I was fortunate enough to win. I think Bill announced 4-time DCI. I actually only won DCI twice in 1994 and 95, but then PAS 94 and 95 as well. So 4 international titles. I was very, very fortunate to do it. And every time I went in to play a solo in DCI up until 1994, when I won my first one, I didn't really know what I was going to do. I had a good idea, but it was never going to be the same twice. So I got real serious about writing it down, the composition stuff I just talked about, and that proved to fare pretty well for me. So it's certainly something that I abide by now, and I force my students into doing as well. But I wanted to do something a little bit different. I based the solo off of an etude out of Portraits in Rhythm by Tony Cerrone, etude number 3. And one of the main themes in that is, and actually the original solo had a concert snare drum here where I played the majority of that etude and then went into a lot of what you'll see me do with the marching drums. I used 2 different marching drums in DCI with it, one with a plastic head, and I just love that sound. I grew up playing on a Premier Marathon and love that sound. So what I use now is this Evans Hybrid S, which has a little bit more of a Mylar-esque type of sound, plastic sound. And then the hybrid gray, you get some different pitch definitions with it, and I found that it just broke up the monotony of this really high-pitched snare drum. I wanted to make it not so much like all choppy stuff, but throw in some nice slower things too, some more old school rudiment type of things. So you'll see me play pretty slow in it, something I hadn't seen people do at that time. You'll see me play fast as well, throw a bunch of tricks and things in it as well. But you'll hear that theme. Change it up just a little bit to open up the 32nd notes at the end to make them 16ths. You'll hear, and a related theme, this. You'll hear me end with that. The bolero ostinato is in there. Do some stick tosses with that. And then a little bit of a linking phrase that every now and then gets me back and forth between two drums. So you hear those ideas intermingled in with a lot of tricks and fastness and all of that. Like I said, at the time, and not that nobody did it, but at the time, and this was like mid-90s, rudimental solos, especially in DCI, was some amazing technical things, but most of it was just that. There didn't seem to be a lot of musical thought at the time. Now, that's not to say nobody did it. Certainly yourself did, sir, and I watched that video many, many times. But it was more in vogue to just throw down as many notes as you possibly could. So I wanted to do something a little bit different, give some thematic ideas to it. The solo's title, Tribute, is dedicated to anybody that's ever taught me. I wouldn't be where I am without my teachers. And like I said at the beginning, I had the fortune to learn from some amazing players and people, and not only just people that were in front of me teaching, but guys that I marched with, either in the lines I was with or that were marching in other corps at the same time. There was a great camaraderie to the activity, and it still seems like it's there, but I learned so much from just drumming with other guys. So this is entitled Tribute, and here we go. Thank you guys very, very, very much. I got to say thank you to you guys. That was incredibly humbling. Thank you so much. I have to say thank you to my sponsors. I wouldn't be able to do what I do today without the help of some great companies. Vic Firth Sticks and Mallets, Evans Drumheads, Zildjian Cymbals, and Yamaha Drums. So they help make me a professional snare drummer, so I couldn't do what I do without them. Thank you guys, Bill. Thanks again for getting me up here. This was awesome. So thank you guys very, very, very much.